There's a lot to unpack here. It is a big, huge case. And joining us right now, we have MSNBC investigative correspondent Mark Santia. We have MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, and also sports wrap host Jason Page. I mean, guys, this is like something out of, some illegal gambling film or a Sopranos episode. I mean, take your pick because it hits all of them. So give me a sense, Mark, of just what jumps out to you about this. Is it the enormity? Is it the money?
It's all of it, Alex. Alex, it's all of it. It's huge names in the NBA. It's the extent, some of the technology, Alex, they're talking about was incredible, and millions of dollars. I mean, when you talk about the NBA, you're talking about Terry Rozier, who's had a great career, currently playing with the Miami Heat, had some great years with Boston. You're also talking about Chauncey Billups, who's the head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers.
Respected.
Billups played for the Knicks. Billups won championships in Detroit. He was a finals MVP in 2004.
Yeah.
So you're talking about some of the biggest names in the game. And then you're talking about, in the one case, you're talking about these are two separate investigations. There's some overlap. But you talk about that poker investigation, illegal poker. So they would find, quote unquote, victims called fish. And they would lure these fish in, according to the feds. They would lure them in with the opportunity to play next to some big names, including Chauncey Billups. And then, Alex, you're talking about the technology. They had shufflers, like card shufflers. You are talking about special glasses. And then something I've never heard about, an X-ray table.
So they could place the card face down and still be able to zero in on that card and know exactly what it was.
You're looking at it right here, right? That's it. Your card is face down, but everybody's in on it except for the fish, the victim, and they can see what card the fish has. And again, it's all about sort of, according to the feds, bilking these unsuspecting poker players in these games to the tune of millions of dollars. And then when people wouldn't pay up, you would see organized crime, according to police, organized crime come in and muscle some of those victims to paying up. This is a massive two massive investigations out.
Arrests from all over the country. We had them in Miami today. We had them in Portland. We had them in Las Vegas. I mean, it really spans the breadth of all 50 states, most likely. So, Lisa, let me ask you about your takeaway on this, the big highlights for you, and what you think went into this kind of a sting operation. I mean, how elaborate was it behind the scenes trying to bring these people to justice, or at least place the arrests?
Well, let me say a couple of my highlights. One is the statement that the NBA has been fully cooperative in the investigation, and I suspect that the league and its commissioner, Adam Silver, will have something to say about that and the extent of its cooperation in this. The other thing that struck me, though, Alex, was from Commissioner Jess Tisch of the NYPD, who really was more descriptive, I think, in her comments about what they discovered in the particular evidence than anybody else was, but went out of her way to talk about what kinds of resources multiple law enforcement agencies can marshal when they work together collaboratively. And so this was a joint investigation of the NYPD, the FBI. There is a task force involving organized crime that got involved here. And of course, this all comes back to the Eastern District of New York, which is the charging office here. But I think we'll hear more in the days to come about the level of cooperation between law enforcement agencies and even the involvement of FBI field offices and U.S. attorneys' offices from around the country, because as they noted, there were games that were played all over the country. There are arrests being made this morning and people who will be arraigned or make their initial appearances in courts as far-ranging as Portland and Las Vegas, and I believe also in Florida. But the final thing that really struck me is the detail about Terry Rozier with respect to the sports throwing conspiracy, right? And the allegation, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, is that they bet collectively more than $200,000 at a point in time where they had inside information about Terry Rozier's injury, and therefore they knew,
lack thereof.
Right, and they took the under on him to the tune of thousands of dollars of profits, which the group then gathered together to count. So the combination, and Jessica Tisch mentioned this, the combination of sort of old school mob tactics straight out of a Sopranos episode, and there is a Sopranos episode that sort of is like this, where you have ordinary people who want to be in on a big wheel card game, and they have Frank Sinatra Jr., for example, sitting at the table to make it look both impressive and legit. That's the role that the feds are now alleging Chauncey Billups played in some of these card games, right? But the combination of that with all of this newfangled technology, whether it's the fact that they money laundered through crypto investments or the fact that they had the X-ray table, the card counting machine, the barcodes on their cards, the combination of the two is what distinguishes this from David Chase's fantasies 20 plus years ago.
Jason, I'm going to get to you in a second on sort of the fallout for the NBA with this, but let me just ask you, the fact that there are crime families, mob families involved in this, it's not surprising given the topic, given gambling, of course, but how does it complicate the processing or the kind of case that prosecutors will bring?
Well, obviously, cooperation is more difficult when you're talking about people who belong to organized crime. They are notoriously difficult to investigate and prosecute, given the consequences for people who are members of organized crime families. And so I will be really interested in the days to come to learn whether there are confidential informants, whether they come from the victim side, meaning the people who are unsuspecting marks in these games, whether they come from the actual sports enterprises themselves. They mentioned the sports betting books that may have been one of the victims here, right? The market for gambling and legal gambling at that may have also been victimized. But then, of course, they may have had someone on the inside come forward, and the danger to that person in doing so, that person's whereabouts, those people's whereabouts, if there are multiples of them, we have not yet seen the indictments. I know that during the press conference, the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office was referring to their unsealing. As we sit here, one of the reasons I have my computer in front of me is I keep trying to refresh those electronic dockets. They have not been formally unsealed for those of us who are not yet sitting in the room. When we see them, it may be clearer to us whether or not there are confidential informants who participated in this investigation, Alex.
So, Jason, give me a sense of just the fallout, the effect on the NBA for this first indictment. How extensive you think it is? You heard Kash Patel, the FBI director, saying this was going to be unpopular. They were going to take some heat for it because NBA players are popular. Sports betting is hugely popular. But don't people want it to be done cleanly? They want to make their money and not feel like they're getting ripped off.
Yeah, Alex, and I mean, this is catastrophic for the NBA. The morning after Victor Wembanyama goes out there and their biggest and brightest young star scores 40 points in his season opener, you have this story. And Adam Silver and the folks at the NBA office have to be cringing. But look, the NBA and all of these sports leagues were so willing to jump into bed with all of these sports betting companies. And everybody had to know. We were all screaming from the top of the mountain going, there are going to be consequences from this. And we all could see it coming. We were all staring down the tunnel at the train coming at us. And nobody seemed to really acknowledge that these were the risks associated with legalizing sports betting, and not just legalizing it, but the leagues jumping into bed with it. So now you have a situation where you've got these players and this coach caught up in it. Who knows how many other players know about it? I mean, and look, like anything else, 2 to 4% of the population in the United States suffers from a gambling addiction. Do you think that doesn't extend to NBA players just because these folks play in the NBA? Of course it does. Look, the only way I think that one of the ways you have to mitigate this, and this will never happen, but with these player prop bets, this ability for sports betting companies to put bets out there that are geared towards what individual players do is always going to open the door for the possibility of a player doing what Terry Rozier did and saying, oops, I got a sore foot, and a bunch of money being bet. The one good thing on this, though, Alex, is the fact that the sports betting companies are doing everything they can from a mitigation standpoint in having eyes on betting trends and odds fluctuating and lots of money going in on one particular bet, and then watching what happens in that case if a player does sit out or decide to pull himself from a game. This is something that sports betting companies have a keen eye on. And it's something that's going to continue to be a problem, Alex.
But, Jason, when they're focusing on that, when they find this kind of trend, it's too late, right, for those people who've already been swindled. And they do not have these X-ray machines that Mark and I were discussing earlier. It is extraordinary what kind of technology was used here.
I could take this from another perspective because I've played poker, and I've played a lot of poker. And I've played, and listen, in my younger days living in New York, I played in underground poker games. So I'm very familiar with sort of the environment that a lot of this took place in. Not something I'm particularly proud of, but something I am a little bit knowledgeable on. If this doesn't kill the underground poker scene, I don't know what will. If this doesn't convince you that you should be playing poker at like a legitimate outlet as opposed to places where things like this could go on, I don't know what will. But I mean, this is a nightmare for the NBA this morning, Alex.
Yeah. Mark, want to jump in on this?
But I think, to your point, though, I think what made it legitimate, allegedly, was you had big-name stars sitting next to you at the table, right? So I'm not just playing poker in sort of this random back alley spot. I'm playing poker with well-known people, very famous people. And that sort of brought a level of legitimacy to those poker games, which is what the Fed said. And then, you know, Alex, as a basketball fan, a huge basketball fan, I think the beauty of the sport is fairness of the sport. And when you hear the sort of the insider trading, that insider info on prop bets, and hey, listen, tonight, put money on this one because they're going to have an injury. They're not going to hit that rebound mark. It's devastating. To a fan, it's heartbreaking. It really is. It's very frustrating.
And also, Alex, can I add something?
Sure.
Devastating to the NBA in recent years has sort of elided some of the controversies that have beset some of the other peer professional sports leagues. If you think about, for example, the impact of CTI and domestic violence on the NFL in recent years, or if you think about some of the rules changes of Major League Baseball and how that has impacted fans and attendance at games, the NBA, on the other hand, is really having a marquee era under Adam Silver's leadership. This has to be devastating this morning for the NBA, which has, by all accounts, been led incredibly well in its recent years.